This video is going to talk about adding integers. So you'll see that there are 3 rules to adding integers. Rule 1 says the sum of 2 positive integers is a positive integer. Rule 2 says the sum of 2 negative integers is a negative integer. And Rule 3, to add a positive and negative integer, find the absolute value of both integers and subtract them. So we're going to review A, what are integers, and then B, how we can add, subtract, multiply, and divide using integers. And this video is going to focus specifically on adding integers. If you take a look at our first rule, this says the sum of 2 positive integers is a positive integer. So if we take a look at our examples are showing us integers. Remember that integers are positive or negative whole numbers. So in order to successfully add 2 integers together that are positive, we simply need to add. But here are the steps for doing so. The first thing we're going to do is find the absolute value of the integers. And then we are going to add the absolute values together. We are going to keep the same sign, which in this case would be positive. So make sure you have this written down on your note sheet, and then we're going to look at example 1. In example 1, we can see that we have positive 5 plus positive 8. We are going to find the absolute value of both numbers. So if we look, the absolute value of 5 is 5 because 5 is 5 away from 0. The absolute value of 8 is 8 because 8 is 8 away from 0. And then we are going to add those numbers together. So we would add 5 plus 8, and 5 plus 8 would get us an answer of 13. So our answer in this case would be positive 13. If we take a look at example 2, notice that in example 2, there are no parentheses. There are no positive or plus signs that represent positive, because in reality, the sum of 2 positive integers just means that we're adding 2 positive numbers together. But again, we want to get in the process of adding integers. So again, we're going to find the absolute value of 21, which is 21. And we're going to find the absolute value of 4, which is 4. We're going to add them together, and we would get 25. If you take a look at Rule 2, now we're going to move into using negatives. So it says the sum of 2 negative integers is a negative integer. So again, we're going to find the absolute value of each integer. We are going to still add the absolute values together, and we are going to keep the same sign, which in this case would be a negative sign, because again, we are adding 2 negative numbers. So if we take a look at our first example, we are going to find the absolute value of negative 10, and we are going to add that to the absolute value of negative 3. The absolute value of negative 10 is 10. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3. When I add them together, I get 13. However, we need to remember that we are adding 2 negatives. So truly adding negative 10 plus negative 3 results in a 13, but this 13 should be negative. So the most important part when we are adding 2 negatives is to remember to put that negative sign in front of your final answer. Looking at example 2, sometimes you'll see some parentheses so that it shows that you're working with a negative or a positive number. Again, I'm going to rewrite this, as you should be doing as well. So I'm going to find the absolute value of negative 21, plus the absolute value of negative 5. The absolute value of negative 21 is 21. The absolute value of negative 5 is 5. I add them together, I get 26. But again, I'm working with two negative numbers, so I need to remember to bring my negative sign down, and my final answer would be negative 26 for example 2. Final rule for adding integers. To add a positive and negative integer, we are going to find the absolute value of both integers and subtract them. So again, we're going to jump up to our steps. So again, we're going to find the absolute value of the integers, and then as this said in the rule, we are going to subtract the number with a smaller absolute value from the number with the larger absolute value. So we're going to set up a subtraction problem where we are going to fill in our numbers. And then our last step is to use the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. And we'll talk about what that means in our examples. If you take a look at our first example, we have negative 15 plus positive 7. So I'm going to find the absolute value of negative 15 plus the absolute value of positive 7. I have the absolute value of negative 15 is 15 plus the absolute value of 7 is 7. But again, this has to become a subtraction sign. So I'm going to do 15 minus 7 because in step 2 it says subtract the number with the smaller absolute value from the number with the larger absolute value. So really, this sign right here is going to be a subtraction sign, and I'm going to do 15 minus 7. 15 minus 7 is 8. Now I need to look at step 3. Step 3 says to use the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. Well, negative 15 has a larger absolute value, so in my answer is going to be negative. So my final answer to this question is going to be negative 8 because negative 15 has a greater absolute value. So truly I'm doing negative 15 plus 7. So I'm taking 7 away from 15 and I'm getting to negative 8. Let's take a look at example 2. In example 2, again, we're going to find the absolute value of 23, and we're going to find the absolute value of 18. The absolute value of 23 is 23. The absolute value of 18 is 18. I'm going to subtract 23 minus 18. When I subtract 23 minus 18, I get 5. Now I need to figure out the sign, whether it's positive or negative. If I look at my two numbers, I need to look at which number is bigger. Positive 23 is my larger or bigger number. It also has the larger absolute value of 23. Therefore, my final answer of 5 is going to be positive rather than negative. So again, just to review the rules for adding integers, you'll see that we have 3 rules, so you're going to get some practice with each of those rules so that you can hopefully understand and use these rules in real-world application questions.